All right, welcome to the Fantasy Fanatics Podcast. I'm your host once again, James, and I'm joined once again by Nate. What's up, man?
So
Today we'll be previewing Super Bowl Sunday, the game between Tampa Bay and Kansas City. We'll also be taking a look at some running back awards for this past fantasy football season, as well as doing the usual NBA and NHL pickups for fantasy, as well as we'll be looking at some injuries around the three leagues. But let's just hop right into the Super Bowl preview. And to start, Nate, I just want to get your just starting thoughts on this game between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
I think it's gonna be a good game. There's gonna be a lot of back and forth. So I think fans of football in general have a good Super Bowl to look forward to.
Yeah, I think so as well. Just seeing how Tom Brady, who's seen as one of the greatest players of all time, is up against Patrick Mahomes, who many people feel is the most talented player in the NFL right now. So I think it's going to be an exciting Super Bowl. There's good teams on both sides, and I can't wait to see how this Super Bowl is going to unfold. I just wanted to ask you, just taking a look at some of the offensive weapons. We'll start with Kansas City. Out of their offensive weapons, what do you think that their key might be to sort of win this game in terms of offense?
I think in terms of offense, I feel like Tyreek Hill is probably gonna be their primary weapon. believe that in the November game that they had, he had 269 yards and 3 touchdowns,
Oh
and he
yeah,
had
wow,
like
yeah, I remember
13
that. Yeah,
receptions.
yeah,
So
yeah. That was actually a good game. I believe that game was it 27-24 for Kansas City. Or was that the score?
yeah, it was.
Yeah. So I what I remember from that game, Kansas City got a pretty big lead. I can't remember how much they went up. It was around 24-10 or so. They went up, something like that. Then Tampa Bay came back in the second half and they made it really close, but they did come short, losing by 3 points. I know Tom Brady was able to bring the team back. And I just think that I know Kansas City's favored by 3 points right now. And I think that line is sort of coming from their previous meeting. So I do think that this game is going to be different, whether it comes down to 1 point, whether it's a full touchdown. I think it'll be somewhere between a touchdown and a point, somewhere there. I doubt it's going to be a bigger lead than that. um Personally, I think that this game could be low scoring, not under 20, but I'd say in the 20s range, sort of where last game was. I don't know what your thoughts might be on scoring, like what you think might happen.
I would say I think it's going to be like a little bit closer to 30, mainly because I'm not sure how you would be able to stop Tom Brady. I mean, they did manage to do that for an entire half, but then Tom Brady just like flipped a switch and then scored like 14 points in the fourth quarter.
Well, he's known to be doing that. He's done that so many years in the past. He did that against the Seattle Seahawks. He did it against the Atlanta Falcons most recently. Even in the even more recent Super Bowl than that against the Rams, I know that it was a very close game at halftime, and then Tom Brady was able to flip the switch and get a touchdown when they needed to, so that they could win that Super Bowl as well. And yeah, even though Tom's been pretty old, I think that he can still play. I guess just looking at the Tampa Bay offense, I'm just looking at some of their pass catchers. I know that we were saying that it looks like Antonio Brown is going to be healthy for this game, which is very important because that makes it tougher for Kansas City defense to cover all of the receivers that Tampa Bay has. And I think just the way Mike Evans is in big games, how he always seems to make those big catches. Got a guy like Antonio Brown, one of the best route runners in the league when he's on his game. And then Chris Godwin, who's going to be amazing out of the slot as usual. I know he had a couple drops last game, but he definitely turned that around and just made some big plays for them down the stretch. I don't know. What are your thoughts on, I guess, who's going to be the main playmaker there in that Tampa Bay offense, receiving wise?
Receiving wise is going to be kind of hard to say. I think it's going to be more of an offense where you can kind of spread the wealth. I think it's gonna pretty much depend on how Kansas City decides to play the offense, and I think Tom Brady's just gonna make some reads from there.
Yeah, I think one thing that we could see is I know Kansas City is they've been big on just getting Travis Kelsey the ball as much as possible. I know in games where they've scored over 30 points, I think Kelsey's had more than 10 catches in all of those games, something like that. Like it's crazy. And like they just want to get him the ball. And I feel like on the Tampa Bay end, they might really need to get Gronk involved in this game, especially if the receivers get locked down or whatever, because I know Kansas City has done a good job locking down receiving cores from other teams, notably the last couple games in Cleveland and Buffalo. They were able to lock down a lot of the main receivers. So I think you're going to need a big tight end most likely to come through, whether it's Cameron Braid or whether it's Rob Gronkowski. I think that one of those two will definitely need to be involved for Tampa Bay. And then just looking at the defenses on both sides, I believe Tampa Bay has the sixth best defense this season. I guess that's total defense, the sixth best in the NFL, and then Kansas City was the 16th best defense. But I know Kansas City's defense has been playing better as of late, and we even saw last year San Francisco had one of the best defenses, but Kansas City's defense made the plays when it mattered most. So, what would you say is the difference between the two defenses, and what do you think they need to do to stop these respective offenses?
I think in order for Kansas City to stop Tampa Bay, I think they're probably gonna try to do what they did in the November game and try to um, force some fumbles from Tom Brady, which is not going to be easy to do in the Super Bowl. But they did show that they were able to do that in the November game. So if they can do that just like two times, that's going to put them in an opportunity to kind of pull away.
I think one thing I noticed from Kansas City's defense when they had some of the safety blitzes, I know Tyrann Mathieu ran some of those safety blitzes and put pressure on Josh Allen. He released the ball a lot quicker and he wasn't as accurate. So I think what they need to do is they need to get enough pressure on Tom Brady, because when Tom Brady has a lot of pressure, he tends to release the ball really quick, faster sometimes than he would even like to. So it's one of those things. I know Tampa Bay's offensive line has been better as of late, but I really think that that's what Kansas City needs to do. They really need to apply that pressure, and I know that they have good safeties and good corners. They just need to, um, like I said, apply some pressure. I know they have Chris Jones up front. They have some other good players. Those players were the key players when they won the Super Bowl. Those are the guys that came to play, both Matthew and Jones. So they're going to need to come and bring their A game again for this week for the Super Bowl. And then just looking at what Tampa Bay's defense would have to do to stop Kansas City's offense, would you agree that pressure on their side as well?
Yeah, the worst thing that you can do against somebody like Patrick Mahomes is make him comfortable. When he's comfortable, that's when like any quarterback when they're comfortable, that's when they start getting their A game out and then you're going to get burned. And Patrick Mahomes is right now the most talented quarterback, so when he's comfortable, he's just going to build up a lot of momentum and it's going to be hard to stop. So a lot of pass rush is probably going to be really important.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to Tampa Bay, they sort of need to repeat the recipe that they used on Aaron Rodgers last week. Just that amount of pressure that they put on him. I believe they had 5 sacks on him last week and at least 20 pressures, which is insane. It's more than he's faced all season. They just really made him release the ball and run around more than he really wanted to, and I think it just really hurt Green Bay's offense as a whole because Rodgers had to force some passes that he really didn't want to. Just looking at the stats, from both teams. I know both teams averaged around 30 points per game this season. So both offenses are fantastic, with Kansas City averaging more yards total, but I think both teams are pretty similar offensively. I know their run games aren't as prominent as their passing games. Both teams are very pass heavy from the looks of it, and just looking again at some of the stats, both teams had over 40 touchdowns this season in the regular season, and both had over 100 passer rating for both quarterbacks. So that's just something to note. Both offenses are very similar, play a very similar style. Um, I guess one thing just to look at is that Patrick Mahomes has only lost one out of his last 25 games. So just getting that into perspective, he's just been nothing short of phenomenal. He's just, yeah, he's just been crazy this year. I believe that only loss came against the Vegas Raiders this season. That was his only loss, but the last 25 games, that was it. That's amazing. And yeah, I think in this game, it's just going to come down to whether Patrick Mahomes can get it done on this defense. I think Patrick Mahomes kind of holds this game in his hands, metaphorically speaking. He's been the single most driving force for this team ever since he started playing, and he just keeps getting better every time I see him play. He always has something new. I saw the way he just juked that defender last week, and he made that pass. It's like his vision is just insane. Some of the things he can do with both his legs and with his arms is just phenomenal. And I think that like I know Tom Brady, he can still pass, but he's nowhere near the athletic ability at this age compared to Patrick Mahomes. So I just feel like that it's going to come down to how many touchdowns can Patrick Mahomes score against this defense, and I figure that that's going to determine what the score will be. I don't know. What are your thoughts just on that?
I think that I can kind of see that. I feel like I don't know what you think, but I was thinking like if they can kind of force Patrick Mahomes to do like bad runs, because he's had a habit of like when he feels like there's too much pressure, he'll roll out and he doesn't necessarily try to just go out of bounds and then go to the next play. He'll try to get as many yards as he can, and that kind of
Yeah.
gets him in trouble sometimes.
Yeah, I've noticed that he's taken some unnecessary shots when he could have slid or gone out of bounds, and I feel like that, if he somehow gets knocked out of this game, it's over for Kansas City. Tom Brady will just burn the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't think Chad Henne. I mean, all due respect to him for that win there against Cleveland, but I just don't expect him to beat a team that's just as well rounded as Tampa Bay is. I believe both teams are very well rounded. I don't see many weaknesses for either of the two teams. And I guess any more thoughts on just the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense as a whole?
I think I think like the way you said, like they don't have a lot of weaknesses. I think that's true. Like even if they figure out how to, I guess, slow down Tom Brady's pass, they still have Leonard Fournette, and he's really good in the open field. So if they just get him the ball, he's gonna be able to get bare yards. So
Yeah. I guess just before we finish up with the preview, um, just sort of give me an estimated score, and then just give me which team you think will come out on top, and then we'll just see how we're looking.
um, think that I would say that Tampa Bay has the advantage. I think it'd probably be around 3 points. So probably be like 30 to 27, something like that.
Okay, and I guess what do you see happening in this game? How do you see Tampa Bay coming out on top of this game?
Um, I just personally I don't really see how they're gonna consistently stop the pass. So I think that it's probably gonna be mostly a passing game, and then they're probably gonna mix it up with the run to try to open the pass up again.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from, and I did predict this Super Bowl matchup actually, as you remember from the beginning of the playoffs. I think you predicted Kansas City going to the Super Bowl, but I believe it was against Green Bay. Yeah, I predicted this Super Bowl matchup just because of the high talent level on both sides. I didn't see any AFC team being able to take out Kansas City with all their firepower, whether it was Buffalo, Baltimore, Cleveland, or any of the other teams that were eliminated in the wild card round. I just didn't see any of those teams as being viable threats to Kansas City. I felt like Kansas City was just going to shrug them off. And then in terms of Tampa Bay, I think it was a little bit more difficult to sort of decipher some of their potential matchups in the NFC. But I guess just looking from a talent standpoint on their roster, and then them just having Tom Brady as their quarterback, the level of competitor he is, even at his age, I just feel like that gave them such an advantage. It gave them the boost that they needed. And then their defense just turned it on both against the Saints when they really needed to, and against the Packers when they really needed to. Not forgetting their first win against the Washington football team, of course. But um, I think if the game was the week after the championship round, I think I would have leaned towards Kansas City because of them being well rested. But I think since both teams have had these couple weeks off, I feel like that it's a lot more closer than we think, and I actually think Tampa Bay can win this game. My reasoning for it is that I know that Kansas City's tackle Eric Fisher tore his Achilles, and he's not going to play in the Super Bowl, so they'll be short at least two or three of um, their starting offensive line from last year's Super Bowl, and that's a big blow, especially with what Aaron Rodgers had to deal with David Bakhtiari not being able to play last week, and then Tampa Bay's defense just shredding that offensive line. I believe Shaq Barrett had like 3 sacks. JPP had like 2 sacks. They just really jumped all over that defense. We like Ndamukong Suh is even there. We don't even talk about him half the time anymore. Like they're just so stacked up at the line, and then you got Devin White and Levante David as their main linebackers, and there's a lot of linebacker blitz that they do. And I know Devin White has really been fantastic these last couple games. He's just the amount of tackles he's made, just played amazing. And I just like with the amount of trouble Aaron Rodgers had in his MVP level season, the amount of trouble he had with his Tampa Bay defense both times, and Patrick Mahomes not being able to put up more than 27 points against this defense last time. This defense is playing better than it was playing last time. So I really see Tampa Bay winning this game. They're also at home. That's one thing we haven't talked about. This is the first ever home Super Bowl team. That it's going to be a big advantage because there are going to be fans in the stands. Um, and it's Tom Brady's 10th Super Bowl. He's been here, done that. I know Patrick Mahomes has a Super Bowl win, but it's going to be really tough for Kansas City to win this game, in my opinion, especially with those gaping holes up front. Patrick Mahomes is going to face a lot of pressure this Sunday, and he's got to release the ball quick. His receivers have to get separation. Um, I know Tampa Bay will struggle if they try to play man to man on defense again. I know they switched that up in the second half last time they played Kansas City, and they were able to defend a lot better. But if Tyreek Hill is being covered one on one, it's over. It's done. So he's going to shred the Tampa Bay defense. They need to find a good zone play to put on him, and they need to execute it. And I think that they'll be able to do that. So yeah, I'm going to lean towards Tampa Bay. I feel like they have both the offense and the defense. I believe their offense is the 7th ranked this year, and their defense is the 6th ranked. So when you have a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense, I think they're going to be pretty tough to stop, even also being at home. So
Yeah, I can see that for sure. That's going to feed into the forcing Patrick Mahomes to roll out, and he's not the best at rolling out in terms of keeping himself safe either.
yeah, when he rolls out, a lot of times he'll make room for a pass, especially to someone like Travis Kelsey. But I guess just yeah, staying safe, especially when everyone's covered and he's struggling to find an opening. Sometimes he'll second guess himself, and he'll sort of run into an area where he's not well protected, and he'll sometimes take hits. I mean, they'll throw the flag and all that, but I mean, it doesn't matter how many yards it is. Your quarterback just took a shot, right? Whether it's a flag, I know Kansas City would get the 10 or 15 yards, but I mean, is it really worth 10 or 15 yards for your quarterback just take a big shot like that? I don't think so. I think that I, whatever happens, I feel like that the backup tackles for this team and the backup guards, they really need to play their best game if the Chiefs are going to win. Let me just say that.
Yeah. And I think for Patrick Mahomes too, I think he shouldn't be afraid of having to use all of his downs. Like just because the the pocket was broken down like one play doesn't mean like you're not gonna be able to score the next down. I think like he knows what to do. Like you just have to take a slide. Like you don't have to get 10 yards and take a shot. Maybe you can just get 5 yards and do a slide, and then second down you have a short pass.
And I mean, even on fourth down, they're very good at executing. Whether I know they have Clyde Edwards-Helaire fully healthy now, which is going to be a big boost for them. Well, I'm not sure how well he's going to be able to run with the way that line is, and I know Tampa Bay has the number one run defense in the NFL, so it's gonna be a very tough day for him. But I know that if they have a fourth down, he's proved in the past that he can capitalize on those. And Patrick Mahomes' quick short passes always work. So it's one of those things, like you said, he can't take any major hit, or he can't get hit with a big shot or anything. Like he's really got to stay composed and just release the ball on time.
Yeah. Like that hit that he took against Cleveland, that made me think like you can't play the way that you play anymore. You have to kind of be a little bit more smart about how you run and how you pass. Like
Yeah,
I mean he's still
for
in his
sure.
prime, but like still you want your prime to be longer.
Yeah, he wants his prime to last. He's got 10 years, 50 million per season. This was the first year that contract kicked in. He's got to last in his prime for 9 more seasons. So, he's gotta prove his worth on that contract. So,
Yeah.
yeah, but it's gonna be a great game. I can easily see Kansas City winning this game as well. It just depends who comes out to play. Just from looking at the numbers and just looking at the situation, I'm looking at Tampa Bay winning. But if Kansas City does win, I'm not going to be surprised. The Super Bowl is very close.
Yeah. It's pretty much a coin flip at this point.
Yeah, I know the odds are favoring Kansas City just because of them being the defending champions and them winning the last matchup between these two teams. It seems like a reasonable odds, but yeah, we'll just see how it plays out.
Yeah.
All right, Nate, thanks for being here for the Super Bowl preview. And now we'll move to the running back awards for fantasy this season on the Fantasy Fanatics podcast. All right, welcome to the running back awards for the Fantasy Fanatics podcast. We'll be going through some awards for the top running backs in this year's fantasy season. I'm joined once again by Nate and by our injury analyst Victoria. Welcome, guys.
Hey,
So
We'll be covering the six major awards that we covered last week for quarterbacks. We'll talk about the most consistent running back of the year, the injury running back of the year, the waiver wire running back of the year, the rookie running back of the year, the playoff running back of the year, as well as the running back of the year. As we hand out the awards, we'll also hand out a runner up as well for each award and just sort of explain why we chose each player for these awards. Nate, I'll start with you, and we'll start with the most consistent running back of the year. Who did you pick to win this award?
so for the winner for consistent running back of the year, I gave it to Dalvin Cook. He has 22.6 fantasy points per game, and the runner-up is Alvin Kamara, 22.4 fantasy points per game. So it was really close. Um, both Cook and Kamara had under 5 games that are under 15 points. So Cook had only 4 games under 15 points. Kamara had only 3 games under 15 points. And Cook had 8 plus point games, and Kamara had 3 20 plus point games. And yeah.
Yeah, that's really solid. Our fantasy point per game percentages are based on half point PPR leagues, which is our standard that we go by. I know some people go by standard leagues and some go by PPR, but by going by half PPR, it sort of balances things out in between, as that seems to be the new standard for Yahoo leagues. I'll move over to you, Victoria. You have an expert injury analysis on the injury running back of the year. Give us your winner and your runner up.
Yeah, so I'll start with my winner for this award of injury running back of the year, and that's Christian McCaffrey. He had approximately 27.3 fantasy points per game, obviously before all these injuries occurred. So he started where he suffered a high ankle sprain in week 2 against the Bucks, and then he missed the next 7 weeks to deal with this injury and finally returned in week 9, but only to undergo a right shoulder injury after falling hard on it in that game. Then, when he was all set to return, he underwent a quad injury, and then that kept him out for the rest of the season. His stats, however, in just the very few games that he played were 225 yards rushing, 59 carries, and 6 touchdowns total. He also caught 17 passes for 149 yards. As we can see, this is just completely unbelievable. And so that's why he gets injury running back of the year. And then moving on to my runner-up, and that's Joe Mixon. He had about 14.9 fantasy points per game. So he played for 6 games at the start of the season until he sustained a foot injury on October 18th against Indianapolis. He did not return to the roster after this. Most likely an injury like this was a midfoot sprain when they mentioned that it was a foot injury. These can be pretty severe, especially if you injure something like your spring ligament or your plantar fascia and you get a tear in that. Those are injuries that can put you out for many weeks and even months. So he finished this very short season, though, however, with 428 yards rushing on 119 carries and 4 touchdowns. So obviously he got really good fantasy points out of that.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I know with the end of the season, Joe Mixon, we were wondering which week he was going to come back before him ultimately being ruled out for the rest of the season. So that is interesting. But definitely, if Christian McCaffrey had played this season, it looks like his stats, although they are inflated by the less amount of games he played, he would probably be around where some of our top running backs are, consistent guys like Cook and Kamara. I'm going to move over to the rookie running back of the year, and I'm going to give that to James Robinson. I believe he was undrafted as an NFL player. He somehow found his way into the role of the starting running back for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Leonard Fournette was released, obviously, and because of that, he was under 10% drafted in Yahoo leagues heading into the season, and it's just interesting that he was one of the top waiver wire pickups between the weeks 1 to 4, and he consistently produced at an average of 16.1 fantasy points per game. He was just solid all the way through. He had over 1,000 rushing yards on the season, and he was just really solid. I believe he had around 10 touchdowns on the year. I know an injury put him out late in the season, but he did play most of the season, and he was the lone bright spot for a very poor Jacksonville team this season. And then my runner-up is going to be Jonathan Taylor from the Indianapolis Colts. He averaged 14.1 fantasy points per game. He had around 11 touchdowns on the season and over 1,000 rushing yards on the season. He was just a solid player. He continued to elevate his game as the season went along. And just being a rookie and all, he was very solid. He just consistently produced. There were some rough patches there, whether it was between him and the coach or just the way that he was running, but he definitely fixed that, and he became a solid running back for the Colts there at the end of the season when it mattered the most. So those are my 2 rookie running backs that I like, with James Robinson being the rookie running back of the year. I'll go over to you, Nate, in terms of the playoff running back of the year. Who do you have there?
So for playoff running back of the year, so we're talking about fantasy playoff, of course.
Fantasy playoff. Sorry, yeah, weeks
Yeah,
14
just so
to
people
16.
don't get confused.
Yeah, sorry, weeks 14 to 16. We consider the fantasy playoffs. So who do you have there?
So for that, I got Alvin Kamara. He's the playoff running back of the year. During the playoffs, he got 30.2 fantasy points per game. And the runner-up is David Montgomery. He got 23.6 fantasy points per game. And I guess just some quick facts. Kamara got 932 rushing yards by the end of the season and 37 reception yards. And he also had a crazy game during a week 16. That was the Christmas game where he had 54.7 points. He had 6 touchdowns, 155 rushing yards,
Insane.
and 3 receptions for 17 yards. So that was a crazy game. That was like a game where it was like, if he had 1 or 2 people who got 0 points, he still could have won. That's how good he was during that week. And for Montgomery, he got 1,070 rushing yards at the end of the season. So that's really good. And for week 16 and 17, he got 19.10 points and 23.7 points. So again, very good numbers.
Yeah, for sure. They were both solid running backs. Many championship teams had these two running backs on their team. I've known some teams that had both Kamara and Montgomery, so they definitely should have been in contention for a fantasy championship with those two. Victoria, let me go to you. I know I touched a little bit on one of these guys that you have here, but who was your waiver wire running back of the year?
Yeah, so I've labeled my waiver wire running back of the year as James Robinson, who is somebody that you mentioned. He had 16.1 fantasy points per game, and he started off the year being under 10% drafted. And he became that starting running back after Leonard Fournette was released by the team. As James stated, he was the best rookie running back this season. Unfortunately, he suffered an ankle injury in week 15. And as James mentioned, he had lots of great points. So he had 1,070 rushing yards, 240 carries, and 10 total touchdowns. Then moving on to my runner-up, so that's Myles Gaskin, and he had about 14.2 fantasy points per game, and he started off the year under 5% drafted. So at the beginning of the season, the Dolphins had about 3 running backs that were kind of in contention for that top position. So that was Jordan Howard, Matt Breda, and Gaskin, as I'm mentioning now. And Gaskin outplayed the other two, so he became the starter for the season. He did sustain a few injuries, though, halfway through the season, so he started out in that starter position. But then he sustained a MCL sprain in week 8 and then missed 5 weeks over that. So most likely you were looking in the second degree range of an MCL sprain, but not one that needed surgery. He then sustained a shoulder injury right after he returned, and that put him out for a couple weeks. And then in the middle of his recovery, he was put on the COVID list. And then he closed out the season playing the last 2 weeks. So he did get some points there. In total, he had 584 rushing yards, 142 carries, and 5 total touchdowns. So in the limited games that he did play very well.
Yeah, surprising with all these injuries and these COVID situations for Gaskin. He was still able to put up a solid about 14 fantasy points per game, which is very solid off the waiver wire. He's one of those guys that was one of the major pickups throughout the season. And now I'm going to hand out the award for the running back of the year. I know this was a tight contest, but between the two candidates I have here, I want to make an honorable mention for a third, and that's Derrick Henry for hitting 2,000 yards on the season. That's something that hasn't been done very many times in NFL history. So congrats to him. But in terms of fantasy, I have 2 other guys that I like. I'll start with the runner-up, and that's Dalvin Cook. We talked about his consistency, how he put up 22.6 fantasy points per game. He was very solid. I believe you said he only had like 2 or 3 games under, 15 points or something. Like that's insane. How he did that. That's very solid. I believe he did have 17 touchdowns on the season, so that's also very fantastic. But I am going to give the running back of the year award to Alvin Kamara, with a 22.4 fantasy points per game, but also that 30.2 fantasy points per game during the fantasy playoff weeks 14 to 16, as well as that big Christmas Day game, like you mentioned. 6 total touchdowns, over 150 rushing yards. He was insane that day. He put up over 50 fantasy points in that game. Just solid overall. Won many teams their leagues. He had a total of 21 touchdowns on the season. He had a phenomenal year. So the running back of the year award I am going to give to Alvin Kamara from the New Orleans Saints. And just looking at the landscape of running backs this year. Um, a lot of injuries we dealt with. I know another major running back that was injured that we didn't mention was Saquon Barkley. I know he didn't start out very well this season, with the Giants struggling and all, but I believe that he can come back next year in a much improved offensive line for the Giants and potentially make an impact. So he's another guy. I don't know if you guys, well, Nate, I'll start with you. Any other running backs from this year that came to your mind?
I guess Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt because I'm a Browns fan. I think Browns fans were expecting, I guess, a breakout season for these two, and I think they've done really well, especially considering this is the first time the Browns have made it to the playoffs, and Chubb and Hunt were pretty much like the cornerstone of the offense, along with Baker Mayfield. They opened up the offense for him and allowed him to pass. And Chubb is like one of those running backs that he just punches holes through lines. So it's going to be really exciting to see how far he can kind of take his game. And same thing for Hunt.
Yeah, I think Nick Chubb also dealt with an injury as well. So there was just a lot of injuries going around. And I know we talked about the Dak Prescott injury last week. Victoria mentioned about everything that happened there. And I guess that affected Ezekiel Elliott in that offense. He just wasn't the same this year. So hopefully he will be able to rebound next season. Victoria, are there any other guys on your mind that maybe came up in an injury report this year or any other thoughts?
No, I mean, I agree with Saquon Barkley. He's gonna be great next season.
Yeah, and I guess just looking forward to next season, just some of the top running backs. I know I've definitely seen Christian McCaffrey up there, Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry. I've seen Ezekiel Elliott. I've seen Saquon Barkley. Just those are some names. Nick Chubb is another big name for sure. Austin Eckler. Just some of the guys that are probably near the top of the draft board next year. So there's going to be a lot of great football to look forward to from running backs next season. And I just want to thank you guys for contributing to the running back awards this week. Next week, we'll have the wide receiver awards for you for the fantasy season. And also being able to recap most likely an incredible Super Bowl game. So we'll catch you next week for more fantasy football, and we'll now move to the NBA portion of the Fantasy Fanatics podcast. All right, welcome to the basketball portion of the Fantasy Fanatics podcast. I'm your host once again, James, and I'm joined by Nate. What's up?
So
All right, let's just dive into some pickups for fantasy basketball. This week's been an interesting week, and I just wanted to dive into some of the pickups. I'll start with a couple, and then I'll turn it over to you. I have Nick Batum up here, and I realized that he is already 50% owned in Yahoo leagues, but his rank is 32, and he consistently puts up great lines. He's averaged about 15 points in his last 2 games or so. And he's putting up about 4 or 5 rebounds per game, as well as adding an assist here or there. And his turnover rate is really low. He only has 1 turnover in his past 3 games. So just some solid stuff. His percentages also won't hurt you. And from what I'm seeing, he's getting a lot of minutes, usually around 28 minutes per game, which is very good. So I think Nick Batum is someone that you should add from the Clippers. Another person to look at is Theo Maledon from the OKC Thunder, and I know he was starting last week. He came off the bench in his last couple of games. He did put up a respectable average of about 8 points per game, about a couple of rebounds, and about 3 assists per game. But in his last 2 games, he has a combined 8 steals. Fantastic stuff. His field goal, it's been back and forth, but his free throw is very good. It's almost perfect. in his last few games, and he turns over the ball a little bit, but I don't think it'll hurt you too much. So I believe Theo Maledon should be added. He's only 16% rostered right now, but he's been added over 10% in the last week. So he's definitely someone that you should be jumping on. And Nate, let me go to you for a couple pickups before I share some of my others. Who do you like picking up?
Sure. So I got a couple of trending pickups. I'll start with Gorgie Jang first. Right now he's 16% rostered, and he was plus 14 the last day. Partially for, I think the reason was that he's had some very good games this past week. He had a bit of a dip his last game, but for the most part he's had over 20 minutes a game, and his average for the season is 9.6 points, 5 rebounds, and 1.7 assists. And over his last few games this week, he's had over 50% field goal, 2 to 3 threes, 7 to 9 rebounds, and he's had double-digit points. Not counting his recent game because he had a dip. And he can get most categories for you. He can get threes, points, rebounds, blocks. He can occasionally get assists, but he's not really a playmaker. Those are more like when he gets like the right play, like when it's the right time to pass, he'll get an assist. But for the most part, he's gonna get threes, points, rebounds, and blocks for you. And I also have Gary Trent Jr. Right now, he's 42% rostered, and he's went up by 12%. He's getting over 25 minutes most games. His averages right now are 12.4 points, 1.6 rebounds, and 1 assist. He's a shooter for the most part, so that's going to be most of where his value is in. So he's going to get a lot of threes, and he's going to get some points, and he might get some rebounds and steals as well. The only thing is his field goals are going to be affected by how like on point his threes are. So if his threes are off, his field goal might take a dip. But for the most part, he's been doing pretty well. And I also have Reggie Jackson. He's 31% rostered, and he's had 6% ads for the last day. And he also gets 20 minutes most games. He has 8.4 points, 2.6 rebounds, 2.7 assists. And over the last week, he's had over 50% field goal, over 60% free throws. And over the last week, he's had 2 to 3 threes every game, double-digit points every game, over 4 rebounds in most games, and over 3 assists most games. And he's had 1 to 2 steals some games. So you should definitely take a look at picking these guys up if you have a chance.
All right, that sounds good. Getting to some of my other pickups, I have DeAnthony Melton here from the Memphis Grizzlies, and he's just been solid in his last 3 games. He's averaged almost 20 points, averaged about 5 rebounds and 5 assists per game, I'd say a couple blocks per game, which is very excellent. And his free throws also been perfect, which is fantastic, and his shooting percentage has been well over 0.500 per game, which is very excellent. He's 31% rostered in Yahoo leagues, and he's been added over 25% in the last week. So everyone is jumping on Melton. So he's definitely someone that needs to be jumped on quickly before he's added in most leagues. Just jumping to another pick, I'll go to Jeff Green. I know some people are saying, his minutes are going to go down, but his minutes haven't gone down. He's averaged around 30 minutes per game. He's averaged, I'd say, about 10 to 15 points per game, about 5 to 7 rebounds per game, and about 3 assists per game, while adding a couple steals usually per game. And I know he might turn over the ball a couple times per game, but I don't think it'll hurt you, as his percentages are also very excellent, and he's ranked 84 on the year. So Jeff Green's been fantastic for Brooklyn. I think he'll continue to be great for you. He's close to 40% rostered, but he's been added around 15% in the last week. So definitely someone you need to jump on soon, as he might not be available in all leagues. And I guess just one more to add is Malik Monk. I know he had that big blowout game where he had 36 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 9 3-pointers, but on average, he'll still get you around 15 points or so per game, usually a couple rebounds, a couple of assists. His free throw is usually close to perfect, and his field goal is pretty high. It's close to 0.500. So he's just solid overall. Although Monk might not be starting every game for Charlotte, he's definitely someone to look to add if you want stable percentages and points totals. So that's all I have. Nate, do you have any more, or can we move into the previews?
I've got one more. So I have Royce O'Neal. He's plus 27 rostered right now, and plus 7% for the last day. He's averaging 8.6 rebounds, 2.4 assists. He gets over 30 minutes a game because he is a starter, and he gets at least 1 3-pointer every game. And he's the kind of player that he fills out almost all categories, and he has a decent field goal percentage, and he gets 1 to 2 blocks a game. Like, he may not get like a crazy high numbers, but he gets decent numbers for multiple categories. So
For sure.
if you need someone who's like pretty versatile and somebody who's I guess off the bench in fantasy, you should definitely pick him up. And one more thing I forgot to mention about Gorgie Jang is that JV is still injured right now, so Gorgie Jang is probably going to get more minutes for the time being until JV comes back. So that's another thing to factor in.
I believe JV's on the COVID list. So yeah, it's however the extent of him being out is, Dieng will be the starter. Um, just before we get to some of the previews, I just want to take a look at the NBA standings. Just looking at the East, you got Philadelphia, Milwaukee, Brooklyn, and Boston. I say are the top four teams there. And then you kind of got the other remaining teams. You got Indiana, who's pretty close to those teams. Then the other teams, a lot of them have losing records. We have Atlanta, Cleveland, Charlotte, New York, Toronto, Chicago. The list goes on. I guess just your thoughts on the East this year, and if any of those teams below the top five can get into a winning record going into the playoffs.
I guess the biggest surprises for me were, I guess, the Cavaliers and the Hornets. I think for the Cavs, we were expecting them to kind of be in rebuild mode, but they've proved that they're still a playoff team. Right now, they're sixth in the league, and they're almost 500. So that's really surprising. Same with the Hornets. They were like a bottom team in the East for years, and now this year they're eighth. So that's a really good improvement for the Hornets. I'm sure Charlotte fans are going to be really happy about that. They're also almost 500. For the teams at the bottom, it's gonna be hard to see. I guess it'll depend on the schedule. I'm sure, for example, Heat fans have been disappointed because they've had a lot of injuries, but I think if they can get some of their starter players to come back, they definitely have a chance at a playoff run.
Yeah, I think just looking at it, I think Atlanta can get into a winning record. They definitely have the team to do it. I know they've had some guys out as well. So assuming they get their guys back, they can get into a winning record, and then possibly if Toronto can turn it around, I could see them potentially having a winning record, as well as Miami if they get healthy. So that might round out your 8 playoff teams there, and hopefully they'll all have a winning record to legitimize the Eastern Conference. And then just going to the West, you got Utah in first. I know they're not talked about as much. Then you got the Clippers, you got the Lakers, you got the Nuggets, and then you got Phoenix. So I'd say there's like a big five there. Those are the top five teams so far. And then Memphis, who's been playing well as of late. I believe they've won 7 out of their last 10. Then you got Portland, you got Golden State, and then San Antonio's just outside, and then Houston's picked it up as of late as well, and they have a 500 record. So I guess maybe from Memphis, Portland, Golden State, the Spurs, and Houston, which two teams do you think might not make the playoffs there?
It's gonna be really close for sure, but I think that I don't really see Houston making it, depending on how close it's going to be, mainly because they're kind of missing the production of Harden right now. I know they did get, I believe it was John Wall, but I think so far this is just the first year. It's pretty much like a different roster, and they're trying to kind of figure the system out. So if we don't see them in the playoffs, I don't think it's going to be too surprising.
Yeah, and I think that Memphis is kind of playing above their heads, of course, being without JV and others. And until they get those guys back, I'm not sure how well they're going to play going forward. They are on a good run, so I don't want to dismiss that at all. San Antonio, of course, is my team, so I'm hoping that they can sort of continue what they were doing. They've been okay over their last 10 games or so. But if they want to make the playoffs, they're really going to have to make a push. And then one team near the bottom that I could definitely see moving up as they get healthier is the Dallas Mavericks. I know they've had a lot of players out, especially due to COVID, and they have been playing better as of late. So hopefully they're a team that can turn it around. Let's just get into the preview. I'll extend it to you. Just some games that you're looking forward to in this upcoming week slate.
So I think on Thursday it's going to be an interesting game between the Jazz and the Hawks. The Jazz right now are first in the West, and the Hawks are sixth in the East. So the Jazz have been on, I guess, pretty much a quiet, like a quiet tear in on the league. Like they've been pretty overlooked, I would say. I know they're not like a big market, so it's going to be interesting to see how well the Jazz perform this week, and it'll it'll be interesting uh to see them prove why they're first in the East. But it'll also be interesting to kind of see how the Hawks do against the Jazz as well. And for Friday, there's also the Raptors versus the Nets. The Raptors are on a 2 game winning streak. They beat Orlando in a back to back. And the Nets are third in the East. And the Raptors really need this win because the Raptors fans, they're kind of used to the Raptors being in the playoffs every year. So there's a little bit of pressure there. Currently, the Raptors are ninth, and the Nets have had a lot of close games. So there might be a chance for an upset, especially with how the Raptors have been playing defense. And on Monday, there's the Bucks versus the Nuggets. Nuggets are fourth in the West, and the Bucks are second in the East. So I think it's going to be a really high level game. And on Tuesday, there's the Celtics versus the Jazz. So Celtics are fourth in the East, and Jazz are first in the West. So again, another high level game. And if we see them in the finals, it could potentially be a preview of the finals game, but we'll see.
Yeah, for sure. Those sound like some intriguing games. I'll just list a few that I am looking forward to. On Thursday, you got the Lakers against the Nuggets. That's a huge matchup with a big Western Conference implications. The Lakers, of course, being third as we speak in the West, and the Nuggets being fourth. So that's always a good matchup. I believe those two teams were also the teams that were in the Western Conference Finals last year, if I'm not mistaken. So. Um, Fantastic matchup for sure. And then looking at Friday, we've got the Celtics against the Clippers. Obviously, the Celtics, one of the big four teams in the East as of right now, and the Clippers being second in the West. It should be a great matchup. Superstars on both sides. Exciting game to look forward to. And then looking to Saturday slate, we've got the Nets against the 76ers. That's a big game. First place 76ers up in the East, as well as the third place Nets as we speak in the East. So big time players on both sides for those two teams as well. We'll definitely see how things shake up in that game. And then I guess just moving to a Spurs game I wanted to talk about. Spurs against Warriors, both Monday and Tuesday. They're playing a back-to-back. The Warriors are 8th right now in the West, and the Spurs are 9th. So if a team can take both of those games, that could really establish them in a playoff spot and really hurt the other team. So I'm really looking forward to that. Hopefully the Spurs can take both games and I can see them sort of move up in the Western Conference standings. But Golden State has been playing pretty well as of late. So we'll see how everything shakes out. And I'm just wondering, any last thoughts on whether it's the NBA season, any other pickups, just anything NBA in general?
I guess a general NBA thing would be that um, there's been a lot of, I guess, big changes in terms of standings. There's a lot of teams that we didn't expect to be in the top 8, and they're in the top 8 right now. And there's a lot of teams that we expected to be in the top 8 right now, but they're not. So I think as of right now, the standings right now may not be finalized. There might be some teams that we don't see coming and they're going to be in the playoffs. So this is going to be an, I guess, sort of a anybody can take it kind of year, I think.
Yeah, we've seen that injuries have had a big part in that, and it being a little bit of a shorter season. I believe it's only a 70 or 72 game season compared to the normal 82. So that does have an impact. Teams have less time to get it together. I believe now is sort of the time where they got to start getting it together, or else they could completely fall off. Teams like the Timberwolves or the Pistons being last in their respective conferences as we speak. It's very tough. You know, I know the Timberwolves haven't had Karl Anthony Towns, and I know the Pistons just haven't played well overall, but definitely those teams should be pushing the panic button at this time. And then, there's just been a lot of change overall. This is shaping up to be an exciting NBA season this year. We'll see what happens and which teams get into the playoffs. And I guess that's what we have for you today for the basketball portion of the Fantasy Fanatics podcast. Thanks again, Nate, for your time. And now we'll head over to the hockey portion of the podcast.
Welcome back to the hockey segment of the Fantasy Fanatics Podcast. I'm your host, Nathan, and we're here with our hockey expert, James Kumar.
Hey, what's up, man?
So, so this week we're going to be looking at some pickups and we're going to preview some games for you. So we'll just jump into the pickups. So, James, what forwards do you have this week for us?
Just taking a look at some of the forwards I have for pickups. I'll start with Vincent Trocheck, and he's just been playing amazing these past few weeks. He's 37% owned around in Yahoo as of right now, as we're recording, and he's been added 12% within the last week. In his most recent games, he's had like 4 points in his last 3 games. He's been a +2. He's had 13 shots in those 3 games, as well as added 8 hits. So he's been on fire. He's definitely someone that you need to add. If you have a center that's underwhelming, if you have an injury to a center, maybe someone like Nathan McKinnon. I know a lot of people are struggling with their McKinnon injury. Vincent Trocheck is definitely someone to pick up. Just looking at some other forwards here, I got Brandon Saad. Even not being on Nathan McKinnon's line in Colorado, playing with Nazem Kadri, he's just played really well. He's had in his past like 4 or 5 games, he's had about 4 or 5 goals, so he's almost had a goal per game. He's chipped in about 3 or 4 assists in those games. He's been a solid +3 in his last 4 or 5 games. Put up some points on the power play. He's put up around 2 shots per game, and he's added 1 or 2 hits in there. So I'd say he chips in pretty well. And I mean, his ice time has been around 15 minutes, but with McKinnon being out, I feel like he'll uptick. So he'll be closer to the 20-minute range, which is kind of where you want to be with star forwards. So Brandon Saad is sort of moving into that range where he needs to be owned. He's only 25% rostered right now on Yahoo. And he's playing in Colorado, most likely bumped up to the first power play with McKinnon being out. So he's definitely going to get a lot of power play time. So he's definitely someone that needs to be added. I also want to look at Joel Farabee. I know the most popular ad this past week was James Van Riemsdyk from Carolina. I know he's over 50% owned now. But looking at Joel Farabee, he's under 25% owned in Yahoo. He had a hat trick in his last game. Some people are concerned about the ice time, but he's getting at least 2 shots per game with that ice time and around 1 hit per game. Um, and over this season, he's just been phenomenal. He's had 5 goals, 3 assists, plus two power play points, 22 shots, and 4 hits over the year. So with his limited ice time and just being on a solid Philadelphia team, he's not going to hurt you in any categories. And he can play both left wing and right wing. So that's another bonus for Farabee. Another forward to look at is Nick Ritchie. One thing about him is he'll chip in and hits big time. Over this past month, he's had 12 hits. So he's just been phenomenal in that area. He's had around 2 or 3 shots per game. He's chipped in at least a point over his last 5 games. So around 5 games, he's averaged a point per game. And he's just been solid, even playing on Boston's power play. So that top end exposure with guys like Brad Marchand, David Pasternak, Patrice Bergeron, other top end players on the Bruins makes Nick Ritchie a solid add. And then just one more forward just to rehash from last week is Carter Verhaeghe. It's clear not enough people are picking him up because he's still only 20% owned in Yahoo. He's just been scoring at an unreal pace being on that top line. He's had 3 goals in his past 4 games. He's been in the plus. He's averaged like 3 shots per game. He's thrown a hit or 2 per game. He's just solid, averaging almost 20 minutes of ice time. And he's only 20% owned. That's insane. He needs to be picked up right away. He can play both center and left wing. He's on the top line in Florida, playing with guys like Alexander Barkov. So he's definitely someone that should be owned. And I think that's about it for forwards. I know you said you had some.
Yeah, so I guess I'll talk a little bit about who I got. So for Arizona, I have Connor Garland. Right now, he's about 41% owned, and he has 3 goals, 4 assists. He's +3, and he has 32 shots on goal this season. I believe for his last few games, he's been getting a bunch of shots on goal, and his plus minus has been really good. And I think he's had about he's had three goals so far. So he can also play left wing and right wing. So I definitely recommend picking him up before he becomes over 50% rostered. And for center, there's Joel Eriksson Ek. He's just jumped up in ownership by +10. He's about 51% rostered, so it's going to be hard to find him, but if you find him, pick him up when you can. So far, he's ranked 28. He has 5 goals, 4 assists. He's +8, and he has 29 shots on goal. So if you're really behind on plus minus, you should definitely pick him up.
Mm-hmm.
And for another wing player, I've got Jordan Greenway. He's 25% rostered, and he's +18% since the last day. He's has 2 goals, 8 assists. He's +8, and he has 14 shots on goal. So again, if you need some assists and you need some plus minus, he's definitely a good wing player for that. So now we'll move on to defense. So who are some defense players that you think people should pick up?
Yeah, just looking at 1 or 2 defense players to pick up. I'll also go back to Minnesota. I know you had mentioned a couple players. I'll look at Jonas Brodin. And just over his past few games, he's been, I'd say his last 3 or 4 games, he's put up about a point per game. He's added about 3 or 4 shots on goal per game as well. And that's pretty good for a defenseman. You don't normally get a lot of shots from defensemen. He's logging close to 25 minutes per game. So I know that might hurt his plus minus a little bit, but he's just been solid in terms of point production. He's been added 13% in the last week. So he's still under 20% owned. If you need like that fifth defenseman to, throw in on an off night, he's definitely someone that you could look at. And then taking a look at Rasmus Anderson from the Calgary Flames, he's still on the top power play in Calgary, playing with guys like Johnny Gaudreau, Sean Monahan, Matthew Tkachuk, Elias Lindholm. And he's a solid pickup. I know that his offensive totals haven't really been where they're at, but he's been averaging 3 shots a game almost. He's been throwing in about a hit per game, chipping in on the power play as well. When he does score points, most of them do come on the power play, and his plus minus won't hurt you. He's been about even over the year. So I think Rasmus Anderson, definitely because of the position that he's playing on Calgary, needs to be added, and his point totals will pick up. You just need to be a little patient with him, and that's what I have for defense.
Sounds good. So for some of the defenders that I have, I guess for the a Washington defender, I have Justin Schultz. He's still 29% rostered, and he has 2 goals, 4 assists. He's +9, and his shots on goal are 14. And Washington is like one of the best teams in the East right now. So his plus minus is always going to be really high. So he's another plus minus guy that you're probably going to want to have on your team. And 14 shots on goal, that's pretty good for a defender, I think. And for Vancouver, there's Tyler Myers. He has 1 goal, 5 assists. His plus minus is 0 so far, which is not bad. And he has 20 shots on goal. So he's a very versatile defender. And he has 5 assists, so that's really good.
I believe he
He's
throws a lot of
plus,
hits too.
yeah, he gets a lot of hits.
Yeah.
He gets at least 1 or 2 hits almost every game.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Is somewhere around there. So he's definitely a hits recommendation for sure.
Yeah, so if you need hits and you need assists, you should probably pick him up. And for that's pretty much for the defenders that I have right now. I think Justin Schultz and Tyler Myers, you should probably pick those guys up, especially if you have somebody who's like out. These guys, they're gonna do more than just hold the line for you.
I think
So
Devon Taves, we recommended him last week and he got hurt. So yeah,
yeah,
definitely if you want to replace Devon Taves, one of these guys you can definitely use to replace him off the waiver.
yeah, that's true. And for goalies, who do you think people should pick up for that?
Yeah, I think the number one pickup for goalies this week should be James Reimer, and that's because of the injury to Peter Mrazek. They said Mrazek might be out long term, so I think just adding a guy like James Reimer, I know that he's been fantastic in his last few games. I believe his only 4 games, he's won all of them, so he's been fantastic. I have no idea why he's under 50% rostered. He's won all 4 games he started this season. That's very fantastic. His goals against average is phenomenal. I believe it's around a 2.0 or so. His goals against average is fantastic. Save percentage around 910. So very good stats, solid stats. And he's playing on a solid Carolina team. So his 4 wins in a row. I mean, he's playing Chicago, Columbus in his next few games. There can be some wins there. Probably 2 out of 3 games there. He can get wins, and I think Reimer is definitely the best option on the wire for goalies. And then just taking a look at Jake Allen. I know people will say, "Oh, he's a backup for Montreal," but whenever he plays in net, he's been great. I know he lost recently 2-0 to Calgary, but he only allowed 2 goals, and one of them actually he didn't even allow the 2 goals. One of them was an empty netter, so he only allowed 1 goal in that game. Then he won his most recent meeting with Vancouver, and then he won a pass meeting with Vancouver and a pass meeting against Edmonton. So he's 3 wins, 1 loss on the year. His statistics are fantastic. Over the year, he's only allowed 1.6 goals per game, which is phenomenal. Save percentage of about 930. So he's really playing at a high level. You might get 1 or 2 starts from him per week, depending on how many games Montreal plays. So if you're getting at least a start a week from a backup, he's great to have, especially if he's putting up better stats. It's better to own a backup with good stats than a starter with poor stats. I know that if anyone owns Thomas Grice from Detroit, I don't recommend it because even though he's a good goalie, he's on a very bad team, so his stats aren't going to be good. It's better to own a backup like Jake Allen. So that's what I have for goalies.
Yeah, I think for goalies, like sometimes there's just goalies that can come off the bench and they're better than their starters. So just because they're starting doesn't always mean that they're going to be better.
Yeah, guys like Jarl Halak from Boston. I know the goaltending situation in Vegas. Both Laner and Fleury are solid goalies. You got other situations like Jack Campbell from Toronto, and then maybe a guy like like I mentioned, Jake Allen, Brian Elliott from Philadelphia, that kind of thing. There's some solid backup goalies out there that should be owned.
Yeah, sounds good. I've also got a couple of goalies. I think for the Buffalo Sabres, I have Linus Allmark. He's about 33% rostered. So far, he has 3 wins, and his save percentage is 91.4%. So that's really good.
It's pretty solid, yeah.
Yeah. And let's see. I also have Kevin Lankinen for the Chicago Blackhawks. He's 42% rostered. He is, I think his rank right now is 35, and he also has 3 wins, and his save percentage is 93.7%. So that's really good.
On Chicago too. That's
Yeah.
stellar. He needs to be picked up.
Yeah, you should pick him up right away. And like I think he had like plus 16% ads. So like pretty much yesterday he was only 36% rostered, and now he's 42% rostered.
Yeah, I think he's one of those guys that, in a matchup against Carolina, he could, potentially pull off an upset with the way he's been playing. So you should watch out for that. His stats have just been solid. His goals against average might hurt you if Chicago's allowing a lot of goals, but it looks like his save percentage is going to be solid because even if they allow a lot of shots, he's not going to allow more than a certain amount of goals on those shots. So his save percentage, it looks amazing right now.
Yeah. He's definitely one of those goalies that's like, even though the team is like not the best team, he's still like, he's like one of those goalies that like he kind of carries the team, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess sort of like maybe like a Carey Price or like a John Gibson, where their teams weren't always good, but they've always been solid. So
Yeah. So speaking of teams, we're gonna go into our uh, preview for our games. So, what games do you think people should tune in for?
yeah, I'll just take one game from each division as usual over the slate this week and sort of just talk about why I'm intrigued by these matchups. So we'll start on Thursday with Nashville against Florida. Florida actually has a 5-0-1 record. They haven't lost a game in regulation. So I just want to see if Florida can keep up this streak. I know they've been playing really solid hockey as of late. And I know Nashville's had a lot of their games canceled due to COVID, whether it's them or whether it's teams that they've had to face. So they haven't played a lot of games this year. I don't even think they've played 10 games yet this year. So I think this will be an interesting matchup for both teams to sort of see which way that each team is trending. And then on Saturday and Sunday, we're getting Colorado against St. Louis. I know Nathan McKinnon won't be in the lineup for Colorado, and St. Louis has been on fire since the last time these two teams met. So I think these matchups will be really interesting between the two. It'll sort of see who the best team in the West Division will be right now, with Vegas still coming back from COVID and all that. Yeah, these two matchups will be amazing between these two Titans in the West. And then from the East Division, Sunday and Tuesday, Philadelphia is playing Washington. Right now, those teams are first and second in the East. So that'll be a matchup telling which of the teams is sort of should be at the top of that division. And then just looking up to Wednesday, we got Toronto against Montreal. And those are the two Titans from the North Division. Both teams playing really solid. Montreal just won their last game, and Toronto did come up short in their previous game, but they're both teams have a very solid record and are both near the top of the NHL standings. The last game these two teams played went to overtime with Toronto coming out on top. So let's see what happens in the matchup between these two on Wednesday.
Sounds good. A lot of high-level matchups this week.
Yeah, I think what is it, like 3 out of the 4 matchups I looked at are like top 3 teams in each division facing each other. So solid matchups.
That sounds good. So some of my teams, they're not necessarily top tier, but most of them are pretty solid. For example, on Thursday, I have Minnesota versus the Avalanche. They just played on Tuesday, and Colorado beat them, but Minnesota's probably gonna look to kind of get the split. So far, Minnesota is third, and the Avalanche are second in the West. So, again, this isn't like gonna be like a top tier first versus second matchup, but again, this is gonna be a, a battle between two very solid teams. So, I think we're gonna be able to expect some high level hockey from them. And on Thursday, the same day, there's going to be Dallas versus the Blue Jackets. Dallas is third and Columbus is fifth. I think Dallas, they're coming off of I believe last week a lot of their games were postponed because of the COVID situation, and they just came back, and now they're already third. So that's kind of really amazing to see that even with the lack of practice that they've had, they've proven that they're one of the best teams in their division. So I'm pretty interested to see if they can kind of continue that. And for the East Division on Friday, I have Boston versus the Flyers. Philadelphia is first in the East right now, and the Bruins are third. So the Bruins are historically a really solid team, and Philly is on fire right now. So I think you can expect another high-level hockey matchup. And in the North, we've got the Battle of Alberta for you guys. We have Edmonton versus Calgary. They're the division rivals in the North, and they both really need this win. This is going to be the first time that they faced, but I believe last season they had a very physical game. There was a lot of big hits. There was a fight, I believe. So
More than one. There were
more than
brawls,
one fight.
scraps. I believe both goalies fought. So
So you're most likely going to see another physical game. So if you like that old school hockey, a lot of big hits and stuff, you're probably going to be excited to see Edmonton versus Calgary. And if you live in Alberta, you're going to want to see this match, especially if you're a fan of one of these two teams. So this is the hockey preview. I think, again, this is probably going to be another really good week for hockey. So far, I think the NHL has had some really solid games. So I was just wondering about, I guess, some general thoughts about the state of each of the divisions this year.
Um, I guess just a general thought. The North Division looks like it's the highest scoring division. So, like I know we've seen games go to 8 or 9 goals for a team in one game. It's been really high scoring. A lot of the top NHL scores right now have come out of the North Division, and it's the division that's been the closest as well. I believe the first to sixth place team are 7 points apart only. So that's like what, 3.5 wins between the first and sixth place team. So that's really close. And then to the East, you can kind of tell which are the top 4 teams. I know Pittsburgh's kind of faded, so they are that 4th team, but I know Washington, Philadelphia, Boston, Pittsburgh sort of seem to be like the top 4 teams there. Looking at the Central, we've also seen a big 4 over there with Florida being on top. And then you got Dallas, you got Tampa Bay, and you got Carolina. So these teams look to be very solid this year in that division. And then looking at the West, I know Vegas was the top team before a lot of their games got postponed. And then you got, of course, St. Louis, Minnesota, Colorado. So another big four over there. So you can kind of see the top four rounding out in each division. And before we forget, actually, I wanted to look at the hockey pool for this week to see, who's coming out on top. And let me just take a look right now to see where we're at for the hockey pool to see who is in first right now. And I'm still in first place. Plan the parade. I'm ahead of Sagan Sunday, which is our injury reporter, Victoria. I'm up by 19 points now. So I've gained about, I'd say 9 points over the last time that we checked. I believe I did have like a 10-point lead last time. So it's about 19-point lead. So I'm definitely settling in as the top team right now. And let's check where you are, Nate. You're actually fourth right now. So you're doing pretty well as well.
I'll take that.
I mean, hey, right? We gotta sort of keep moving up. And I mean, you are 42 points behind me, but that can be made up, with injuries and, just solid nights from your players. So
Yeah. I mean, you are the hockey expert, so that's kind of to be expected.
I know if I lose, then am I really the hockey expert? So, yeah.
So hopefully some of our viewers who joined our pool, hopefully they can kind of catch up with us. So I was
Or
wondering
else you'll have to
who's third,
interview
actually.
me.
Yeah. So I guess just for the sake of the interest of all the viewers, what are the standings so far for all the teams?
Oh, you're gonna make me go through all the standings. Well, I'll just list the top five. The top five in order of names: Plan the Parade, Sagan Sunday, Jonathan's Team, Jake Paul's L, and Stall Tactics are the top five right now. So those teams are looking good. And then I guess anyone that wasn't listed, I guess you just gotta catch up, and then you'll hear your name on this podcast.
Yeah, sounds good. Hopefully their team can catch up. And for those who are third and fifth, hopefully they can catch up to James so that they can get an interview. And hopefully for you, James, you stay on top so that we can keep calling you the hockey expert.
Well, I mean, if you have to interview me, I mean, I've always got hockey advice for everyone, like I said, so I don't mind doing the interview.
Yeah, no problem. So this is going to be the end of the hockey segment for the Fantasy Fanatics podcasts. Tune in next week for some more pickups and for more previews.
All right, welcome to the injury portion of the Fantasy Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, James, and I'm joined once again by our Sheridan College AT student, Victoria. What's up?
Hi.
Let's just jump right into some injuries. We have the Super Bowl coming this weekend. For in terms of fantasy or offense, we have three main injuries. We'll start with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Antonio Brown. He didn't play last game against the Green Bay Packers. So, what are his chances of playing for the Super Bowl?
Yeah, so a couple weeks ago against the Saints in the playoffs, Antonio Brown underwent a knee injury. He was labeled as day-to-day. However, he did not play this week. Sorry, not this week, the week against the
Green Bay game,
Packers.
yeah.
Yeah, that one. And then also now this past week where they had a break, he obviously did not play. So he's had that 2 weeks of rest. At this moment, though, he is still very doubtful if he will play. He did have a limited practice this week on Wednesday, but the injury report listed him as doubtful. So looking at that, we do not know if he'll play. Even if they label him as active, they have done this with other players from other teams where they were active and then didn't end up playing. They might just put him there as if we need him, we'll use him kind of thing. But he may not see many passes and that kind of thing. He may not be on the field much.
Yeah, for sure. And then also that was the last of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And then moving to the Kansas City Chiefs, I have two names here. The first is Sammy Watkins. He hasn't played at all during this playoff. So what are his chances of playing in the Super Bowl? I know he had a big impact in last year's Super Bowl.
Yeah, so he is out due to a calf injury. He practiced on Wednesday and he claims he's actually very optimistic for playing on Sunday. He's missed these last few weeks mainly because of a lot of swelling in his calf. The sign of swelling is obviously not good because this probably indicates a second-degree injury. However, he's now been out for 3 weeks total of rest and recovery, and that's the amount of time that you need for a second-degree calf strain or contusion, whatever it may be that he might need to recover. So I do think he will play, as he himself is very optimistic. And so I think we will see him this Sunday.
And then lastly, the running back for the Kansas City Chiefs, Le'Veon Bell. I know Clyde Edwards-Helaire did return to last week's game, so he should be good to go. But what about Le'Veon Bell?
Yeah, so he's been struggling with this questionable knee since the last couple of weeks of this season. He was held out of the AFC Championship game over it, and he was experiencing major swelling in practices. This type of injury could obviously be from a sprained ligament or a middle torn joint capsule. This may also be a form of jumper's knee, where the patellar tendon is inflamed, or bursitis of the knee as well. I mentioned previously with these kinds of swelling injuries, especially jumper's knee and bursitis, they depend on flare-ups. And so if he experiences one, he won't play. And if he doesn't, then he will. He looks good to go. However, in the reports say he is expected to play. So if he doesn't, then you'll know it's probably due to a flare-up just before the game.
Yeah, for sure. Let's move to the NBA and just take a look at some injuries. What about Larry Nance? What's an update on him?
Yeah, so he played on Friday of last week and Sunday, but it seems this right wrist pain that I mentioned last week is back as he was experiencing it again. It kept him out of both Monday and Wednesday's game. He's questionable for Friday's game right now, so we're going to need to watch and see regarding him.
All right. What about LaMarcus Aldridge?
Yes, so he was out from Wednesday's game with a right hip flexor muscle soreness. This coach stated that he will be out a little bit longer than expected because this coach made the statement that he'll be out for a bit and then also mentioned the word operation in his report that he will not need an operation. This indicates that they were probably thinking he did. So this probably leads me to believe this is a second-degree hip flexor strain. He wouldn't have mentioned that word unless that was a possibility. So if so, he's probably going to be out for 3 weeks or so. So I would put him on your IR.
All right. What about DeAndre Hunter from the Hawks?
Yeah, so he's been out since Friday with a knee injury after getting an MRI to see what has been going on. This MRI revealed this kind of wear and tear on his articular cartilage of his right knee. So what the articular cartilage is at the ends of your bones and your kneecap and all bones, you have this cartilage that surrounds it. It's like this white kind of tissue, and it helps to prevent a lot of friction. And so with wear and tear, sometimes there's no direct mechanism with this. This is just constant, playing sports, just wear and tear. Things can happen. They can break down. You can get swelling and pain in the area. So he'll be out for the next week, and then the docs will reevaluate and see if he's ready to play after about a week. So for now, keep him out of your lineup.
What about Derek Jones Jr.?
Yeah, so he suffered a left foot sprain last week in Thursday's game against Houston. So just to break down what possibly could be going on, he doesn't have to do with any ligaments around the ankle, or else they would have said it was an ankle sprain. It could be a sprain of like his sprig ligament, for example, which stabilizes the arches of his foot. It could be his short plantar ligament. If it's a midfoot sprain, it could also be a forefoot sprain. So it could be like a sprain of your plantar plates, which are the ones that run from your metatarsals to your proximal phalanxes. This would be turf toe, is what we'd call that in football, but there's not really turf in basketball. So because of this, we obviously don't know what it is, but he could possibly return this weekend. So seems this injury was only a first degree nature. So doesn't matter what it is, we should see him back by this weekend.
What about PJ Washington from the Hornets?
Yeah, so he left Monday's game with a right foot sprain. He did not play Wednesday either. Nothing much has been said. And like I talked about with the possibilities of the foot sprains in the last injury with Derek Jones, he is likely suffering with one of these that I mentioned. We have no timeline for him. So for now, keep him on your bench and just keep watching updates regarding him.
What about James Wiseman from Golden State?
Yeah, so he sustained a sprained left wrist in Saturday's night's game. He underwent an MRI, and this confirmed the sprain. The team said he'll be reevaluated in about a week's time. The Warriors coach says he should be back within 10 days. So this MRI probably confirmed a first-degree sprain of his left wrist and not something much more severe. And so a first-degree sprain takes about a week or two at most to recover from. So keep him on your bench for now, and he should be back by mid to late next week.
And what about Marcus Smart from the Boston Celtics?
Yeah, so he sustained a calf strain. The team has announced it's only a first-degree calf strain and have labeled him 2 to 3 weeks. However, if it's only a first-degree strain, he should be back at about 2 weeks instead of 3 weeks time. So that's a good sign. But obviously, keep him on your bench for now.
What about Aaron Gordon? I heard he suffered a pretty severe injury. What was that?
Yeah, so he sustained an ankle sprain against the Raptors. After watching the footage, you can see him moving into the zone, and as he steps forward, he lands in this inverted position. It looked like a pretty severe injury, and so now he's expected to miss 4 to 6 weeks. No surgery has been announced, so most likely this is just a second-degree sprain of either his ATFL or CFL ligaments, which are on the lateral aspect or outside of his ankle, which he would have stretched out when turning his ankle inward. So I'd put him on your IR for now, as he's going to be out for a little while.
Yeah, well, I guess now moving to the NHL and some injuries there. We found out about Peter Mrazek. What's up with his injury? How long will he be out?
Yeah, so he suffered a right thumb injury on January 30th against Dallas. He just underwent surgery on it, and he's been labeled a longer term injury. Most likely he had a 3rd-degree sprain, which would have been a complete tear, and it's most likely his ulnar collateral ligament. So if when looking at your thumb, it'd be the ligament that surrounds here, and it goes from the head of your metacarpal, to your proximal phalanx. He's currently day to day. Sorry, not him. He is currently out, not day to day, as has to recover from this surgery. He's probably going to be 6 to 8 weeks approximately is the timeline for this. So put him on your IR for now.
Yeah, and with a shortened 56 game schedule, that could be up to maybe 20 to 30 games, depending. So that is a long term injury. As we mentioned in our hockey pickups, James Reimer is a must add in all leagues, as he will be the Carolina Hurricanes starter going forward. Let's look at Chris Letang. What's his injury?
So he's out with a lower body injury after facing the Rangers. I got to watch the video footage of the moment of the injury, and we see him go into the boards and kind of slam into them. And it looks like he may have gotten in some kind of contusion, so which would be like a large bruise. So he kind of went in kind of from the back and side. So it could obviously be something like a hip pointer injury, which would be his hip bone slamming against the boards and causing a large bruise in that area. Or he could also be a gluteal contusion, which would be his glute muscles slamming into the boards and also having this same effect. He's currently day to day and does not play until Saturday, so I think he should be back by then unless the team announces it as something more severe, such as a 2nd-degree contusion, and puts him on that injury reserve. So for now, keep him benched and see how he's doing Saturday morning before you put him in.
And then for the Colorado Avalanche, I know they had a long list of injuries. We'll just go over a couple of them that really relate to fantasy. We'll talk about Nathan McKinnon and also Devon Taves.
Yeah, so Nathan McKinnon has sustained a lower body injury and is labeled week to week. Of course, this injury could be anything and most likely of a 2nd-degree nature with large tissue damage like a sprain or strain or contusion. I'd put him on IR for now and check on him week to week. Moving on to Devon Taves. So he sustained an injury in his foot after blocking a shot on Thursday night. He does not have a fracture. This is something that they confirmed by x-ray, so most likely he's suffering from a foot contusion. He'll miss the next couple of weeks, so just keep him out of your lineup for now.
What about Tyler Bertuzzi?
Yeah, so Tyler Bertuzzi has an upper body injury. Of course, with this incredible discretion in the NHL, not really revealing much, this could obviously be almost anything. However, he definitely won't play the next 6 games as the Red Wings are on the road during this time, and getting him to fly commercial would not be ideal at this COVID-19 time. So keep him out until February 15th, which will be their next home game, and he should be back by then.
Okay. What about Matt Dumba? What kind of injury does he have?
Yeah, so Matt Dumba sustained an injury in the third period against the Avalanche on Saturday. His left skate kind of got tied up with his own teammate Jordan Greenway's right skate, and Dumba's right leg then kind of collapsed underneath him. This is most likely some kind of knee injury. Of course, it could be a lot of different things. And he's been placed on the injury reserve, and the coach says it doesn't look good. So hopefully, this doesn't mean something like an ACL injury or MCL injury. He'll likely be out for the next 2 to 3 weeks at least. So just keep watching him and see what happens after those 2 to 3 weeks.
What about Sam Reinhart for the Buffalo Sabres?
Yes, so he sustained an upper body injury that has kept him out the last 2 games. The team does not play until February 11th due to COVID cancellations, and he's traveling with the team on that 4-game road trip following this. So by February 11th or just after that, he should be good to go.
What about Justin Schultz? I think I saw him get a puck to the face. What happened there?
Yeah, so he was struck in the face by a puck on Thursday night. He's labeled as day-to-day, so most likely there's no fracture, and it's more of just a major contusion. He hasn't played since then, so this could be something like it might be a lot of swelling causing a vision obstruction, so that could be why he's out. But the moment that nothing obstructs his vision and he's good to go, he should be able to play with just a full face shield on, and nothing else keeping him out. So we should, if he did travel with the team to New York, we should see him on Thursday. And if not, then we'll most likely see him against the Flyers on Saturday.
Speaking of the Philadelphia Flyers, do you have an update on Sean Couturier?
Yeah, so as we talked about last week, he suffered a costochondral separation, which is a rib separation from the cartilage. He's set to return in the next week and a half or so, so he should be back in your lineup by next weekend, which is good news.
All right, that sounds good. Going to some COVID situations around the league, could you update us on sort of what happened with Washington Capitals situation?
Yeah, so in Washington, just Ilya Samsonov and Evgeny Kuznetsov are still on the COVID-19 list after that hotel gathering affair. The other two teammates, Alex Ovechkin and Dmitry Orlov, are back. So this might mean that Ilya Samsonov and Evgeny Kuznetsov tested positive while in this quarantining situation. So they might be out for the next couple of weeks, most likely. So just keep this in mind and keep them out of your lineup.
I know Mackenzie Blackwood was taken off the COVID list, but New Jersey seems to have had a breakout. What happened with New Jersey?
Yeah, so New Jersey Devils had a massive COVID outbreak with now 14 players on the list, such as Connor Carrick, Kyle Palmieri, I think that's how you pronounce his last name. Palmieri, yeah. Jack Hughes and Sammy Vatanen are just a few on that very long list. The team will not play until at least this weekend, as they need to see if they have enough players for their roster in order to play, and if not, their games will be probably postponed into next week.
And then also the Buffalo Sabres, what's going on with them COVID related?
Yes, so they have placed 2 players, Rasmus Ristolainen and Taylor Hall, on the COVID list and have shut down their facility. So most likely this indicates that Rasmus and Taylor Hall have been tested positive. The team believes that this occurred when they played the New Jersey Devils, and then that was what caused the outbreak. There was that contact on the ice and caused these 2 players to get COVID-19. They will not play until February 8th at least for now, so just keep that in mind when doing your lineup.
I know you were telling me how you had both Ristolainen and Hall on your fantasy team, so that's a pretty major blow. Moving on to some other COVID cases. What about Alex Pietrangelo?
Yeah, so he was added to the COVID list and is out for now. We do not have a timeline for him or if he was added due to a positive or close contact. So for him, it's going to be just watching him and seeing kind of what happens and keep him benched for now.
I think what I did hear was that when the coaching staff had gotten tested positive for COVID, he was a close contact with the coaching staff. That's not confirmed, but that's something that I heard. So that could be a possibility.
But I did see that the head coach is back, so he's been cleared. So hopefully Pietrangelo will be coming.
I believe by Friday their game should be starting back up for the Vegas Golden Knights. So we should see that. And then one last COVID case, that's Capo Caco from the New York Rangers.
Yeah, so he was added to the COVID list for a very short period of time, but then was quickly removed 2 days later. So most likely this was just a false positive. He's good to go.
All right, that sounds good. Thank you, Victoria, for your time.
Yeah, no problem.
And I just want to mention that, as always, we're on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. So like, share, comment, leave a review for us. Just keep getting the podcast out there. If you enjoy our injury analysis, if you enjoy some of our pickups, some of our recaps, previews, all of those sorts of things, just like, comment, share, review, And as always, we'll have links below for timestamps, as well as for the Fantasy Fanatics Podcast hockey pool. And then once again, just thank you for listening to the Fantasy Fanatics Podcast, and we'll be back next week with an episode.